Content trigger warning. This recording includes some discussion of mental health crisis and suicide that may be distressing or triggering to some members of our audience. We wanted to remind our audience that if you're having any thoughts of harming yourself, to call or text the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. The Lifeline provides 24 hours confidential support to anyone in suicidal crisis or emotional distress. All aboard for episode 430 with service to Poughkeepsie and Trenton. Okay, those two places are completely in different directions if you don't know your geography of that region, so it's kind of a joke. I don't know. If you have to explain the joke, it's not a joke at all. Anyway, I'm Doug White, and it's the Security Weekly News. It is episode 430. Welcome to the week of 10 November 2024. We've got Struwwelpeter, Krampus, Flutter, Apple, DLink, C++, Josh Marpet, and more on the Security Weekly News.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for the Security Weekly News. ThreatLocker implements a least privileged approach to cybersecurity, blocking every executable unless specifically authorized by your team. This methodology mitigates ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits, and ensures 24/7, 365.25 protection for your organization. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help prevent known and unknown threats in your digital environment, safeguard your data and operations from threat actors, and align your organization with respected compliance frameworks, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker. All right, from exile on the island of Elba, we're back, and it's the Security Weekly News. I'm Doug White. Welcome to the show. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment, or I will turn this car around and we won't go to the Science Museum today. Hear my dad saying that right now, although we weren't going to the Science Museum, but wherever we were going, I can hear him saying that. All right, Stop and Shop. It's owned by Ahold Delhaize, which is a Dutch supermarket chain. Sorry, Dutch friends. My terrible pronunciation in Dutch is just world renowned. I can barely say Jos Verstappen, come on. Anyway, Stop and Shop, if you don't know, is a grocery chain like King Soopers, which you also may not know, but it means they're everywhere in the Northeast. In, like Kroger's, A&P, Key Food, Aldi, whatever that grocery chain is you see everywhere. Well, Stop and Shop looked more like GOM in 1980 in that it was a store and it was open, but the shelves were somewhat bare. Ahold Delhaize disclosed that they had experienced a cybersecurity issue and that some of their services were impacted. They didn't say what. They didn't have any other details either. They just said something happened and it was a problem. Yeah. And however you say that in Dutch, I'm sure one of my Dutch friends will tell me pretty soon how to say that in Dutch. But anyway, there's a lot of logistics in running a grocery chain, and making sure that there's tonic water and limes in the store is, a challenge because, the limes are coming from like Argentina or somewhere. I don't know where they grow limes, and the tonic water is coming from Schweppes. And I don't know where they make Schweppes, but, they have to get it here somehow. And they also took all their little self scanners offline so that when you ran in to get tonic water and limes, you had to go to that human checkout where they get all judgy and they start looking at you and like, why are you buying 4 bottles of Schweppes and 4 limes and and that knife and they don't sell Tanqueray gin in the United States at Stop and Shop, so you have to go by Liquor World on the way home. Hi, Liquor World. Lou says hi from the great beyond. So if you couldn't get any limes last night, well, now you have some idea why. Liquor World was the only place that I could walk in with Lou, and everybody in the place jumped up and said, "Hi, Lou," and that guy ran off to the back to get a case of Tanqueray. I mean, I'm not even kidding. It was amazing. But there aren't many other details about this now. But grocery chains, watch out. North Korean attackers are targeting Apple Mac OS systems using Trojanized notepad apps and Minesweeper games, because we got to have more of those. And these games were created with Flutter. Now, the reason people are falling for this is they're signed with legitimate Apple dev IDs. So that means that if you went to get one and you were expecting your Mac OS to say, hey, don't download that, it's not a legitimate ID, it didn't. Now, we saw this before recently. So this is the second time we've done a news story on this in not very many months. So the app names in this case are cryptocurrency themes. I don't really know what that means, and they didn't provide any of the app names, but Jamf threat, however you say that, Yamf threat, they found the activity, and they said that the campaign seems to be more of an experiment on how successful they are at bypassing Mac OS security rather than a full-fledged operation at this point. Jamf said that they found multiple apps on VirusTotal that appeared to be innocuous to all the AV scans, but they did contain stage 1 functionality to connect with the North Korean servers. Yeah. Now, all these apps were built with Flutter, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's a Google framework. It's a really nice Google framework, actually. And what it does is it allows a developer to create a natively compiled app for a lot of different platforms using code that's written in Dart, which is an app dev language that Google developed as well. And that means that you can push out apps for a lot of different platforms that are all compiled from the same source, which is a really nice thing to be able to do. And you can produce JavaScript or WebAssembly or native code or whatever, and that's really nice. Google developed Dart, and it is open source if you want to play with it. And then the Flutter framework is also open source, so you can also play with that. But basically, you can take some existing code, like say Minesweeper, which is this, I don't know why anybody would want to download a Minesweeper game at this late date, but people do. And it's freely available, so you can get the Minesweeper code, mod it up in Dart with whatever you want to add to it, like say, I don't know, a backdoor Trojan, compile that out so it'll run on your target platform, and then name it something fun like Find the Bitcoin Game. This is the modern equivalent of my Star Trek game. Oh, sorry, someone's Star Trek game, StarTrek.com. It's not mine. Anyway, so victims install the game, run it, play the boring game, and then, this thing is in the meantime phoning home, and that phone home lets the download stage get something a lot spicier if it wants to. It doesn't seem to be doing that at the moment, but that's the next step. So you might want to remind all your people about installing apps on company equipment or even their home equipment, and think about, how do we control this? Because this is obviously getting ready to evolve into a new problem that's just sort of, I think, fledgling at this point, but it's coming. Apple added a new security feature in iOS 18.1 last month, which is quite interesting because they haven't actually mentioned it. Basically, what it does is it causes an iPhone to automatically reboot after a long idle period. Now, the reason for this is that when it reboots, it re-encrypts all the data and makes it much, much harder to break into the phone. Now, you may be saying, gee, Doug, why are you talking about this? Well, guess what? Forensics heavily involves, at this point in history, getting into locked devices, because every case now involves, we got this guy, he was stealing purses down in the mall, and guess what? He's got a phone. So all of a sudden the phones become, you got a domestic, guess what? Multiple phones involved. There's a very famous domestic case in the state of Rhode Island that involved the phones of the boyfriend, the mother's friend, the ER doc, a whole stack of stuff that gets involved in this. And, usually scumbag people will not give you their iPhone login code. Although if you think about it, you could hold it up to their face, but that's not the whole point. What happens is law enforcement noted this because they found out that their phones in evidence were rebooting themselves in police custody. So, when we used to do training on this on mobile phones and things, we always told them, keep it plugged in and make sure the phone doesn't shut down, because if it does shut down, you might not ever be able to get back into the thing. So, and this was called a paint can protocol or something like that, because they used to store phones in these things which were literal paint cans, because at one point in time, not now, but at one point in time, a phone put inside of a paint can couldn't connect. And they used to buy these paint cans at like Home Depot and then use them for this. 404 Media reported that the reset switches the device from the mode after first unlock to before first unlock, which means it's a lot more difficult to get in using any kind of forensic unlocking tool. So basically, if the phone is not unlocked, it's in your storage or evidence locker or whatever plugged in, and they don't know, they didn't say how much time this was. It eventually reboots. That re-encrypts all the data on the phone, and now you got a problem. So when you unlock an iPhone, you usually use a PIN or a biometric, like, Face ID or all that kind of stuff. And what that does is it loads the encryption keys into memory on the phone, and that decrypts the data on the fly. So, if you have the phone, you can try to bypass the PIN screen, and then you get the encryption keys out of memory, and then that's going to let you unlock all the data on the phone. But if it's in that before first unlock state, the keys are stored on the phone, not in memory. And now they're encrypted too, and getting them becomes very, very difficult if you don't have a PIN or something to get into the phone. So you might want to think about this in your paint can procedures for evidence, because if you're storing evidence like this and your procedure is to keep them, plugged in and booted up, they may reboot on you while they're waiting for you to examine them or whatever. So you might want to develop some kind of quick imaging protocol for mobile devices if you're working with those a lot today. Even if it's corporate, you may have the same problem. If you have any DLink NAS hardware, you should probably check it out after DLink disclosed a vulnerability. A command injection flaw could allow an attacker to remotely hijack your NAS boxes and take control of them, which would, of course, allow them to get all the data off there, which is probably all your backups. And, of course, they could also use that box as a jumping off point to be a trusted insider in your network. You trust your NAS, etc. Now, but you have your NAS on a public VLAN? That's very naughty. Krampus will be visiting you this holiday season. Or maybe that giant cat from Iceland that comes to bad children's rooms while they sleep and removes their left kidney. Or maybe Struwwelpeter will show up and cause your fingernails to curl inwards and turn your hands into horrible claws that slice up your face when you're trying to eat your hopel. Or Art the Clown. Art the Clown could show up. All of them at once. Yeah, we should make a Struwwelpeter story about VLANs to try to scare people into using them. And if you don't know what Struwwelpeter is, it's an old 19th century German storybook that was given to children to encourage them to behave. And like all good 19th century children's books from Germany, it's absolutely terrifying. When the children don't eat their gruel, their tongues fall out. It's really horrifying, but it's effective. Yeah. Well, anyway, this vulnerability is a 9.2 CVSS score, and it affects a bunch of DNS 320s, 325s, 340L versions of DLink NAS, at least so far. DLink considers all of these devices to be end of life, which means they basically, when you ask them, are you going to patch this? They go, we recommend you upgrade them to our shiny new ones. You need to protect these things, regardless of who made them, how old they are, or whatever. And even if you think they're completely exploit free, you just really don't want Art the Clown showing up on Winter Solstice Festival night and turning your guts into some kind of network cables. Ooh, network cables made out of human flesh. I am so sending that to Damian Leone. I am. I'm going to send that out right now. Damian, call me. I got an idea for Terrifier 4. You need it for sure. In that same light, you have to patch. You can't always patch because they go, sorry, end of life, but you have to patch. That's going to be the second story in the Struwwelpeter book. The boy who didn't patch and his feet turned into apples, and some old man ate the apple feet, and then he had to walk around on old 3-com switches strapped to his leg stumps. Yeah, that's story number 2 in my Struwwelpeter book for the modern age. A new phishing campaign is exploiting a high-severity bug from, wait for it, Sunday night? No. 2023? No. 2022 during the pandemic when we just didn't have a chance to patch? No. 2017. Like a previous decade. This is like catching cholera or something. It's ridiculous. So Remcos, which is a remote access Trojan, was listed among the top 10 malware strains of 2021. And this is a variant this is a new variant that was first reported on the 8th of November by FortiGuard Labs. How do you catch this thing? An email with a malicious Excel document is attached. Now, this isn't going to do anything to you if you have patched up current stuff, but if you've got, something old, it's an old bug from 2017 that exploits Microsoft Office or WordPad that's not been patched, And if the victim opens the Excel file, well, guess what? It provides backdoor access to the system, collects all the usual info via a downloaded HTA file, and then an exe file called dllhost.exe downloads, and that starts a 32-bit PowerShell process to load malicious code from extracted files and run it in PowerShell. That shouldn't be happening, and it doesn't if you're patched. Now, being as how this is so old, there's all kinds of exploit kits available for that. They're probably so old that they've got exploits. I mean, there's probably plenty of exploit kits that actually contain exploits as well as other exploits for other exploits that were old. Augustus de Morgan says, be careful out there. But obviously, this has been patched. But guess what? Naughty types don't patch. And then they get got by, I don't know, a ghost with murder hornets in its mouth on winter solstice. Look, review your patching programs. Review what you got on site. Use email security blocking. Monitor your network activity for malicious downloads or any downloads. And be sure you know that Dr. Fang has a Windows 98 machine running Novell down in the Reanimator lab that's connected to VLAN 1 and has an exposed internet port so that Dr. Fang can host his Doctor Who trivia game site on a Windows NT 4.0 server running IIS version 1, and his Guess the Toxin game is running on OS 2 Warp machine he built in 1997 out of spare parts from 1985. You know about that in your network, right? You got that logged. You're watching the traffic. Yeah. I bet you could put up any of those things and people would go to it. I know they would. Well, I put this op-ed up because it's kind of a rant sort of day. And well, this is a rant, but CISA and the FBI, both United States agencies, really, 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 really want you to quit using C and C++. They do. Why? Because they call them, quote, memory unsafe, quote, end quote, programming languages, even though they really should be called, quote, lousy programmer enablement languages, end quote. Because you see, C is all powerful. Before there was the word, there was a great void and darkness. And then Dennis Ritchie said, let there be C, or something like Malik C. And go forth and replicate yourself, but don't do any recursion. No recursion, at least not before you're married. Keep that recursion to yourself, or you're going to go to hell. Now, I get CISA's point. I do. Programmers are fallible, and they cut corners, and they stay up too late watching that video about bobbit worms, and then they write bad code. Don't Google bobbit worms. You'll be sorry. Now, C is all powerful, and C can do anything. C giveth and C taketh away, and yea, though you deprecate and recompile, it's too late, and lo, the end times are upon us with your bad memory management. So CISA keeps issuing missives condemning C and calling for its disuse and trying to get programmers to use Rust or Python or Go or Swift or God's help us all, C#. Don't say that to any programmer. You'll get punched. But if you're a dev, it's tough. I mean, I know how to code this in C, and everything is in C at my company, and C is driving our business model. And then here comes CISA going, yeah, you could just use Rust. Yeah, I mean, really? All the Rust people are going to burn in the great bit bucket for all afterlife. Kill them. No, not really. I'm just kidding. Kill it virtually. But I mean, that's how wars used to start. I mean, that's how new wars will eventually start. Honestly, I don't blame CISA. I really don't. In general, humans are lazy, and they're always going to get tired, and they're always going to get cut corners and watch videos about bobbit worms. I probably won't give up the Church of C anytime soon, but Rust is out there. It makes sense. It helps protect your organization from lame, bad code because you just can't do that in Rust. Python too, but Anyway, CISA is insisting that companies subject to their guidance come up with a roadmap away from the Church of C by 1 January 2026 or suffer the consequences. The argument is that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or something like that. And like I said, I'm not opposed to this. I just think it's being stated for the wrong reason. Don't blame C for your shortcomings, okay? If you want to say it would be better if our lame-ass programmers used Rust, I'm good with that. But don't be blaming C for all your problems. Yeah, there you go. A man from Michigan in the United States ran chat rooms and Discord servers targeting children playing online games and coercing them into self-harm, sex acts, suicide, and other violence. That sounds like the start of a Rob Zombie movie. I mean, that's bad, or Damian Leone. But anyway, this gentleman, Richard Densmore, received 30 years in prison on Thursday for this. And Densmore was a member of an online terrorist group called 764, which the FBI described as a tier 1 terrorist threat. The statement from the FBI said, quote, "This defendant orchestrated a community to target children through online gaming sites and used extortion and blackmail to force his minor victims to record themselves committing acts of self-harm and violence." I think that was a plot line in the show Evil. The purpose of the group is apparently, quote, "accelerating chaos and disrupting society and the world order." I think it's mostly because Densmore is a twisted bastard. But Densmore went by the handle Rabid in the online sewer community. Despite that this bastard really should likely get tied to a burning barrel of pitch and set adrift, I really wanted to mention this from the CISO perspective, because this same tactic, as horrible as this is, and I'm not demeaning it, but I want to talk about it on our side, this same tactic that works on children also works on adults. Coercing your employees is a thing. And this very same tactic that's been modeled here can be used to get your people to do things. Maybe, as horrible as the things Densmore was doing, this could get your employees to do things. Densmore got children to carve the word rabid on their chest with razor blade and take pictures of it so he could put them in his collection of twisted stuff. But these same kinds of people can coerce your people to do a lot less dramatic things that could also be very dangerous to your organization. I mean, you think about you should think about, how do you talk about this kind of thing with your adult employees and maybe provide some sort of support before they end up getting drawn into something like this for different reasons? Because embarrassment and exploitation work at all age groups, and it's always worked. So, can I get you to download my rat and install it on the company server because I captured that video from your webcam, or you downloaded something naughty and I made a log of it and now I'm threatening you with it, or maybe you didn't even do that. I'm just trying to scare you. Yeah, it works. Well, he's the guru of everything, the all-seeing eye and the guardian of the repository of global wisdom. Please welcome Josh Marpet. Hi, Josh.
The all-seeing eye. You get blown up my head more and more every week, man. Every week. So, your story before this last one for the rabid, disgusting one, no offense. The one about C and C++ is pretty close to what I was talking about today. It's interesting that we have government agencies that are really trying to make things better. And I respect that they're trying. Sometimes they do it badly, but they're trying. Okay. And one of the things that CISA is doing is it's security by design. In other words, start with a memory safe language, start with a good framework, start with if you do things with frameworks, languages, and bits and bobs that are, software bill of material, whatever. If you start off with good components, you're probably going to have a better chance of ending up with a good result. And that makes sense. I like, that's duh. Okay. There's a problem here, because we have a 30-person development team and all they know how to do is use, Cold Fusion from 1997. And so, but they write beautiful websites in Cold Fusion, and that's what we have. We're not going to switch to secure by design. Well, why not? Because you're not making us. And so for everybody that's out there going, well, we get a pen test so we can check a box. We do this so we can check a box. We are absolutely compliant, but that means we're not actually secure, or we're secure but not compliant. Like, it has to come to a place where there is incentive and enforcement. Without those two things, you're not going to get people to do the right thing. All right. Look, secure by design, you may disagree with Rust and Go and so on and so forth. You may disagree with the language choices that they've made for the memory safe languages. That's fine. We can discuss that. But the idea of using a memory safe language, the idea of using proper components to build, well, this makes sense. But unless you have some way of enforcing that, and unless you have some way of incentivizing that, well, it's not going to happen. How many companies are out there saying, oh, well, we do this and that because we have a SOC 2 and we have PCI, or we're high trust, we're whatever. Okay. That's great. That's fantastic and wonderful. Why did they do that? So they can make the sale. It was not so that they could be compliant. It was because a law forces them to be Sarbanes-Oxley SOX compliant. It was because there's a customer of theirs that said, where's your SOC 2? And if you didn't have it, you're not making the sale because that's part of our vendor risk management requests or demands, really. And so we have incentivizations and we have enforcement. And if you don't meet those, well, or if you don't have those, you're not going to have these companies doing it. I mean, I'm going to go back, and I know I harp on this all the time, but CMMC, prior to CMMC, the federal government, especially the Defense Department, said, hey, all of you contractors out there, we're just going to trust you that you're actually going to be NIST 800-171 compliant. As long as you tell us you're compliant, we're going to trust you. And so they lied. Not that companies ever lie on the internet. I mean, that never happens, right? So it's a significant problem. Now, right now, CISA has a secure by design pledge. Companies can actually pledge that they will be secure by design, and then they get a little thing to put on their website, like a shield or totally something that's not cliched as all hell. But anyway, so if you take the pledge, does it mean that you're forced to do the things that the pledge says? No. So how many of the companies that sign that pledge are actually going to do those things? And how many of the companies that should sign that pledge are going to do those things? And how many of the companies that don't even know the pledge exists are going to do those things? Yeah, it's going to be a lot smaller number than any of us want to believe. So what we need is incentivization on the one hand and enforcement on the other hand. We need to mandate that you are secure by design. Now, there may be 5 different ways to be secure by design. You don't necessarily have to use Rust. You don't necessarily have to get rid of C++. You don't to go to Dr. Doug's article, but you have to be secure in that you've built a framework, you've built a platform that allows you to follow a set of principles, and it will end up with a much better chance of a more secure, not 100% secure. Anybody tells you they're going to give you 100% secure anything, throw them out of your office, they're lying. But a better chance of getting a more secure application, system, process, whatever it is, so that at the end of the day, we have a better chance of not getting whacked by a stupid cryptocurrency app that got signed by an unwitting developer for North Korea, for God's sakes. Okay? So that Stop and Shop can get their damn groceries, and so that everything can actually, work. So at the end of the day, I guess I'm advocating for proper regulation, not necessarily more regulation, but proper regulation. Look, the minute Sarbanes-Oxley came in for all public companies in the U.S., it was amazing how much they cared. The CEO and CFO gave a crap about having secure, auditable financial transaction systems. Why? Because they had to sign off and they went to jail if it got fucked up. So what we need is proper regulation that says, hey, you in the driver's seat, you're going to jail if you screw this up. Now, there's a difference between make a mistake, negligence, and total incredible screw up. Okay? Make a mistake. It happens. That's what a cyber insurance is for. If you're negligent or make a ridiculous, insane, malicious screw up, you're going to jail. All right? And that's what we need as an industry. Josh, you're an ass. Why would you want us to have so much regulation? Oh my God, I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. You want to be a blue collar worker? Because that's where we're going if we don't have some professionalism. And I'm going to start saying this a lot bloody more. We are going to be blue-collar workers, and there's nothing wrong with being a blue-collar worker, but we're going to lose a hell of a lot of our salary. We're going to lose a hell of a lot of our benefits. We're going to lose a hell of a lot of our prestige, our PTO, our benefits, our old stuff, if we don't have professional information, even potentially professional licensure. But we're going to lose it and become blue-collar, which, hey, there's nothing wrong with it. But I kind of like having my income up here. It's a detail. So enticement, incentivization, enforcement. Make it happen, or we lose a lot of who we are as an industry. Dr. Doug, back to you, sir.
Thank you, Josh. I'll say this: Kohlbergian pre-conventionalism, something I like to say a lot. And that's what you're talking about essentially, because pre-conventionalists are people that don't do anything, or they do things unless there's some negative outcome if they don't or they do. So, a Kohlbergian pre-conventionalist is the person who finds a wallet laying on the street, looks around, sees nobody around, says, ha, free wallet. And that's kind of where we are with some of this stuff. We talk about this a lot. We tell programmers, you've got to do better. You can't write this bad code, and they just keep doing it. And like you said about Sarbanes, Sarbanes didn't have any teeth until it did. And when it had teeth, suddenly everybody cared and they fixed it. I'm not a huge fan of regulation either, but I agree with you. I think people don't necessarily do the right things for the right reasons because they're Kohlbergian pre-conventionalists. We all are. We can't escape our own selves. We're all lazy. If I want to write this code, but we do have to fix it. I agree with CISA's recommendation, to be honest, despite all my ranting about C. I don't think people will necessarily do it, but it's really tough to go to a company. I remember this from, we were talking before the show about something from Y2K. And, I remember when they came in Y2K and they said, get rid of all your COBOL code. And I'm a fan of that. I'm like, COBOL needs to be put in a vault and burned, in the fires of Etna. But companies had millions and millions of lines of COBOL code, and there were millions of programmers out there who only knew COBOL, and just telling them, use C, don't use COBOL. That's easy to say. It's really difficult to get companies to implement that. So I do think CISA is trying to force at least government agencies to move in the right direction because they're assuming that programmers are going to be lazy and they're not going to write good code. I just wish they'd call it that instead of saying it's C's fault. It's not C's fault, folks. It's not. The tool is not to blame for the actions of the programmer. So enough. Thank you, Josh. And finally, if you're like me and you were around, you may not have been born, you probably knew this voice and you were brought to the brink of a psychotic episode by it. This person recorded the words, welcome, and you've got mail. And his name was Elwood Edwards. Now, if you worked in an office, it was kind of a security measure if you heard that somewhere, because it meant that somebody was illicitly accessing the AOL network from their work machine, probably illegally through your modem banks. If you lived in a dorm or maybe with your parents in the 90s, you probably heard this, or you just visited your parents in the 90s. Because I remember I would wake up every day hearing my dad turning on his machine at 5:47 a.m., and he'd flip his old Windows, machine on and then dial up AOL, and I would be visiting and I would hear that, welcome, and, you've got mail. But America Online was the second biggest thing that ever happened in terms of online after CompuServe. And it became one of the biggest online enclaves of the 1990s before the actual internet that we use today became a real commonly accessed thing. Most people originally accessed this thing via dial-up modems running at maybe 14.4 baud. And, Elwood Edwards died this week at the age of 74. I didn't know the person. I never met him. But I can definitely, in my head, right this very moment, hear that voice in the distance echoing in the fog. Creepy. Actually, maybe it's coming from the basement and that old Windows machine I brought from Lou's house. I may need to go. Yeah. Anyway, that's the news. Thanks, Josh. And I will see you next time on the Security Weekly.